of our seminar series, Lockdown to Unlocked. Today's session is Leadership and Leading the Business, and presented, of course, by Pollyanna Lenkic. I hope everyone's comfortable, whether you're having your car serviced or waiting for something else at the moment. Have a cup of coffee or tea and relax and spend this time nourishing your leadership skills. I know I've really enjoyed it for the last couple of weeks. If you haven't attended the previous sessions, I just wanted to and if you haven't met me before, my name is Shauna McAvoy. I'm an Associate Director at Morgan Consulting. I have over 20 years experience working in consulting to small to medium-sized businesses and professional services firms. My success, I think, stems from truly partnering with my clients to understand their business and attract and retain high-quality talent, which, you know, we know during difficult periods like this, it's the most important thing is to retain and attract very high quality talent for your business. Today we have Pollyanna presenting, Pollyanna Lenkic. Pollyanna is an executive coach, author of Women and Success, Redefining What Matters Most at Home, at Work and at Play. Pollyanna is also a writer for Smart Company and Thrive Global, providing expertise on leadership, creating high-performing teams and constructive cultures. Pollyanna is on the leadership faculty of Homeward Bound projects. This took her to Antarctica for a whole month in 2019 to work with 80 incredible women with a background in science, technology and engineering from over 26 countries. Pollyanna also started her first company when she was 24 years old in London. It was a specialist IT consultancy, which she took from one person to a total of 18 full-time team members and over 100 consultants working throughout the UK. In 2000, she exited her business after reaching a turnover of £11 million and selling her 50% share. Something else very interesting about Pollyanna, which I hope those who've been here previously will remember, that she's done 500 skydives. So I think you can be assured that Pollyanna understands the importance of taking risks with total responsibility. What we'd love today is for you to use the chat box. We'll answer those questions and comments at the end of Pollyanna's presentation, but I really look forward to having an interactive session. So good morning, Pollyanna, how are you?
Good morning, Shauna. I'm very, very well, and welcome to everybody. It's such a pleasure to have many of you back with us who have been attending all three sessions. And Shauna, I just want to say, always a pleasure to hang out with you, and huge pleasure to have been able to work with you to deliver this series. I think it's a really important time for us to all to come together as a community and support each other with the skills that we have. So
it is. Very grateful. We've had fantastic comments too, Pollyanna, people actually having real takeaways as soon as they've left the meeting. So, and when they've got time to think about it now, which is perfect, isn't it?
I think so. And I want to say thank you for choosing to spend your time with us today, because there are so many other things that will be competing for your attention and your time. So I'm very grateful to have you here. Wonderful to see some people who have been attending the sessions 1 and session 2. Now, as you know, we always recommend, I've got my notebook, we always recommend that we have one of these very high-tech devices, which is a pen, and a notebook, but I've tidied my notebook away. So a notebook for the session, because you have chosen to be here today. Therefore, I want you to get the absolute best out of that choice, out of that investment. So do use the chat box. It's really boring for us if we're just not seeing the interaction. And of course, it's not about us, it's about you and you getting value from attending today. However, if you could please pop some comments in the chat box. What color was my parachute? Andrew, that's a really good question. I always had purple parachutes. I had 3 parachutes. My third one had Go Faster stripes and would fly forward speed at 45 miles per hour on a nil wind day, which was pretty awesome. So I loved a good spiral back down to earth. So excuse me while the beeping's happening and more people are attending. Welcome to all of those who are just joining us now. If you haven't done a skydive, I hugely recommend that you do. It's one of those life experiences that I believe everybody should have. If I could please ask everybody to put their, mute themselves, just so that for the quality of the recording. I can't mute myself, unfortunately, because I'm talking, but we still have people arriving. Kate Matson, I realise that you're on the call and you're the Kate Matson that I know. Welcome, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here. Please, for the people who have attended the previous sessions, I'm really curious, what have you got that's been of value so far? Pop that in the chat box. So that's really good information, not just for us, but it's great information for other people who are also looking on the chat box. Being welcome, nice to see you pop up there as well. Also for people who have just joined and haven't been with us before, then please tell us what brings you here today. It's not because you had nothing better to do, yeah? You came here for a reason, and that reason, I'd love to know what that is. And I know that Shauna and also Cess would be really keen. Cess is my wonderful team member. We've worked together for the past 4 years, so she just makes everything happen in the background. So Cess, thank you so much. Grateful to have you here today. Krishna, good to see you again as well. Sergi, wonderful to see you. I'll see you at the organic market on Sunday when we pick up our fruit and veg. So it's great to see so many people that I know in other aspects of life as well. I'm going to share my screen now, which you'll just give me a second while I do that. And if you could please pop those questions. Shauna, if you'd like to share some of the things that people are mentioning while I do this. No, it's all gone quiet. Can everyone still hear me? Let's hope you can. Okay, welcome, welcome, welcome to session 1. It's incredibly important, absolutely important, that we spend time investing in ourselves. We know this. In session 1, we looked at leadership and self. The absolute fundamentals to any leadership initiative or how we lead others is knowing who we are. So if you're on that session, and Nicole Ria is just saying, understanding yourself supports understanding how you understand and impact with others from session 1. Absolutely, Nicole, you're preaching to the converted here. Session 2 was about leading teams, how we lead teams. Now, I can still hear some buzzing going on there, but I've turned off all my sounds elsewhere, so hopefully that won't keep happening. If you're not on mute, then please pop yourselves on mute. So leading teams was a more systemic lens. How do we lead a system as an entity in its own right? That was the focus of session 2. So as you can see, leadership is multifaceted. There's not one way, and certainly my way or the highway, not such an effective way of leading self, others, or your teams or your organization. Today's session is leading the business. Leading the business is about leading your people, because what is an organization? What is a business? It's a structure. It's a structure that sits in a file somewhere on a computer, in a filing cabinet. You have the structure of your organization, but the actual organization itself, the lifeblood of your organization, is your people. How do you invest in your people? So if you will remember, from the previous session, we had a look at, why is that not working? We had a look at this model, and that was the self, other, climate, team, organization model. When we're focusing on ourselves, really super duper important. Do you remember? Put yourself in the picture. I had an amazing client I worked with many years ago who had a complete personal strategy map of her career, the house that she wanted her family to live in, where they wanted to be, the lifestyle that they wanted to live. The problem was she did not put herself in the picture. And sadly, she now lives in a flat, in an apartment in Docklands, and her family live in the house that she visualized. Now, there's something incredibly powerful when we put ourselves in the picture of what we want to create. And there's also an impact when we don't put ourselves in the picture. And I know that from session 1, people there was more to that. However, when we stay there, it's narcissistic. That's where we're the House of Cards character. When we focus on others, that's where we're going to look today. We're looking at focusing on the other person. And when we do that, we have a laser-like focus on them. So Sean, if I'm working with you directly, say for example in a one-on-one coaching conversation, or as a leader when you're mentoring or coaching or engaged in a sponsorship conversation with your people, you are focusing completely on them. The skill that is required is to get out of the way. That is self-management, and that's a coaching skill. So Shauna, when you're interviewing people for a role, you get yourself out of the way and you focus first of all on what they want.
Absolutely, yeah, that's right. And look at what their needs and what they need to understand about themselves as well. Yeah,
because it has to be a good fit for both.
Yeah.
So therefore, focusing on the individual takes a particular skill set and a particular amount of discipline and self-management. The good news is all skills and capabilities that you can learn, grow and develop. Team was the focus on the system. We're not doing that today, but today we're focusing on other and we're focusing on organization, because the organization is the culture. So the organization itself, legal entity, sits in a filing cabinet somewhere. The organization, the culture, the people, the lifeblood of your organization, that's where we need to influence so that we can create a culture. And in our words, create a culture where leaders create leaders. Because the alternatives to that don't produce the results that you're looking for. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. A few years ago, I had the absolute privilege to work with an organization. I was asked to come in by the chairman, and he wanted me to work with a group of 24 partners in his professional services firm. Now, the reason that he invited me in and asked me to work with them was because they were having some challenges at a cultural level. The HRD and myself worked tirelessly and really hard to prepare a session that would speak to and meet the partners where they were at. So 24 partners were invited, or actually mandated, to attend this session by the chairman of the organisation, who sat on the board of the organisation. 2 hours before the session was due to run, they mutinied. And they decided that they did not want to attend, and they wouldn't attend for the whole day. But what they would do is they would give us 2 hours. So my colleague and I are driving down the Nepean Highway, which is a highway in Melbourne, a road in Melbourne if you're not from Melbourne. And we got a call from a frantic HR director. The partners have mutinied. They will not spend the day. The chairman's livid, and we don't know what to do. Reassured her that if 2 hours is what we had, 2 hours would be what we would work on, and all would be good. So therefore, we arrived in the room, the partners arrived, 2 partners out of 24 were late. So everyone else, so 24 partners, two people arrived on time, everybody else was late. And it was really interesting watching this group come together. And now we're looking at what's going on for the individuals, but we're also looking at what's going on at a cultural level. So 10 minutes in, there was the most senior person in the room in the partnership who also held the most rank. This chap just kept looking at his watch and really didn't understand. And he was sort of giving the, I'm annoyed, stop wasting my time. I don't really want to be here. He was very uncomfortable initially, angry, and was definitely exerting the most influence on the room. When we gathered everyone together, we redesigned the timeline, and I quickly put everybody through an interactive exercise. And that interactive exercise was to put into experience the model I showed you previously: self, other, teams, organization, world. What happens on that more global level? After that exercise, I asked them, what is happening in this room from a point of atmosphere? What is happening at that sort of cultural level? And that was the link that we were making. So everybody sat in silence. Eventually, we came to know the main influence in the room as Watchman. Initially, Watchman was just huffing, puffing, rolling his eyes. People were looking down at the floor. Nobody felt safe to engage in the conversation. People were really nervous. There was a lot of tension in the room. It certainly wasn't a friendly audience to work with at this point in time. I asked if I could, so I volunteered some words. I said, and the words I volunteered were aggressive, hostile, punitive, shame. And as I started naming and voicing the words that were happening in the system, people started to get a little bit more uncomfortable. It's not easy to face the culture that you're creating if it's a toxic culture. It's much easier to face the culture that you're creating and created if it's a constructive culture. This culture was not constructive. And as we went through that interactive exercise, we gave them an experience to train, to learn how to identify and name what was actually happening at a cultural level. Has anybody ever walked into a room when somebody's had an argument? Do you get it? Just pop it in the chat box. If you've walked into a room and somebody's had an argument, do you get it? Yeah, absolutely. People are saying they do indeed get it. You do get it because you feel it. You feel it in the atmosphere, even if they're smiling at you, even if they're smiling at each other and pretending all is well. So as I was offering the words that had happened in the room, I'm not talking about the culture of their organisation, happened in the room. Within the first 3 to 5 minutes of this group of people meeting two strangers for the first time, I then shifted the lens of the conversation and asked them if they were prepared to do the work together today. I reminded them that the door wasn't locked. They didn't have to say if they didn't want to. However, before they leave, I just said to them, before you leave, there's just something I want to remind you of. The reason your organisation is hemorrhaging support staff, the reason your organisation has a higher than industry standard, or if there is an industry standard, normal bullying rates and complaints against it, the reason your chairman has asked for this session to happen is because of the culture all of you, this leadership team, have created. And isn't it interesting how you have managed to create the same culture in this room in 5 minutes with two strangers that are here to support you that you don't know? Isn't it extraordinary the power that this team has to create culture? It's remarkable. The problem was, the question actually is this the culture that you actually want to work in? Because it's not much fun for you, I'm guessing, to maintain this level. What do you think? Did they deny it? Rebecca, what happened was everything just went incredibly silent because it was really hard. It's actually confronting. It's incredibly confronting to think about a culture that you've created and have a mirror held up. That's part of a coaching, mentoring conversation where you hold up a mirror and you reflect back to the system what's happening in the system. So the system of this group of people was creating a toxic and rancid culture where no junior staff would work in, no support staff would work in. Their retention on back office staff was 3 months maximum. If you were there for 3 months, you were a long-serving team member. So they had a lot of work that they had to do. So what was going on? What was going on is they created a culture of, my slides aren't working for some reason. They created a culture of blame, animosity, hierarchy, and it was completely eroding what they actually want. I don't believe that anyone in that room woke up in the morning and said, you know what, I'm going to go out and wreak evil on the world today. I'm going to actually make my co-workers' life a misery. But actually, that's what they were doing. So I asked them what they wanted to do. And I said to them, before I leave, I just want you to know that our lives will not change whether you do this work today or not. My colleague Sandy and I will be sad for you, and our heart will go out to how this impacts not just your professional life, but your personal life, because how you do anything is how you do everything. If you're leading your organization in this way, I'm guessing that your home life probably has similar echoes in your personal relationships. And it turns out that one of the senior people had some quite significant challenges with his 15-year-old son, which actually he ended up managing to resolve or turn around after the leadership program. It was probably a good 12 months later. Alex Lell, I can see a question from you. I will come back to you. Does insecurity play a part? Yeah, absolutely. You're actually, thank you. Insecurity does play a part, but sometimes also habit plays a part. And it was really interesting, the values of this organisation, the values on the wall, on their posters, one of the main ones was respect. And yet, of course, they weren't living in their behaviours, respectful behaviours. I reminded them that their lives wouldn't change. Our lives wouldn't change, theirs would. If they did this work, maybe their lives would change. I also reminded them we'd be charging them for a day as well, so they may as well stay. I asked them what they wanted to do, because right now their opposition were gleefully taking staff that did not want to work for them. So we sat in silence for exactly 7.5 minutes, according to my co-facilitator. And it was a long 7.5 minutes. Now, there's something really important about the way you sit in silence with somebody. We sit in silence by what we term in the coaching profession as holding the space. Actually just holding the space so people can take time to process what they need to process. So they have time and space to not feel judged while making decisions that need to be made. Does that make sense? But just sitting there staring at people going, hey, what do you want to do? Confrontational. Holding the space for somebody and asking them, what do you want to do? That's really respectful, caring behaviour. It's also a skill, a good one as a leader to learn. After 7.5 minutes, the main influencer in the room actually said, I think we have work that we need to do. And to their credit, they pulled courage out of the bag and they did the work, and it was an uphill climb. It wasn't easy for them. Now, all the teams and people we work with aren't always in such a state of disrepair or in having such deep challenges when it comes to toxic cultures. However, sometimes it's really helpful to highlight the extreme situations and scenarios to land an example, but also to see what ignites. When you hear that story, for you, what are you going, I never do that, that's so not me, or feeling a little uncomfortable? It's a bit like watching The Office. Does anyone watch The Office with Ricky Gervais? There's a reason we get uncomfortable when we watch that show, because it can be incredibly confronting. So what we want to do is we want to be an organization, we want to be leaders who create leaders, because when we create leaders, we positively build and influence the culture of our organizations. It's a little bit like putting good probiotics into your body to crowd out the bad bacteria. So creating constructive behaviors that empower others to step into their leadership, creating psychologically safe environments for them to do so. How safe is it for your people to fail around you? Good question to ask yourself. What gets in the way of creating a culture where leaders create leaders? Well, a couple of things. One of them is when we create dependency. When we create dependency in our culture, what happens is people rely on us. I know, obvious, yeah? However, think about it. How do we create dependency? Well, we fix, solve, and save. We do everything for everybody because it's faster, often. How else? Just pop some messages in the chat box. How do you see dependency being created in leadership? What do you observe? Maybe it's observations from somebody else, or maybe it's something that you've observed yourself or actually taken part in yourself. Power and control, absolutely, Rachel. When we exert power and control, and actually, Rachel, that bleeds into the next category as well. So thank you for putting that in. Lots of rules, no autonomy. Absolutely, Kathy. But also, it's not just about the rules, Kathy, it's about the hidden rules. Because sometimes our rules are overt, we get them, we understand the rules. Sometimes the rules are hidden, like there are rules, but we don't know them. So therefore we're breaking rules we're not even aware that are rules. And sometimes they're implicit, they're implied, and they're overt. So think about, how am I as a leader creating dependency in my team, which may feel easy to begin with, however it becomes incredibly problematic. We diminish the potential and the power of not just our organization, but of the individuals. And they leave. You know, when people aren't empowered, they leave. The next piece, and I think, and Rachel, you're alluding to this one as well, when we exert power and control, there's a big difference between standing in your power and exerting power. We create dysfunction. I mean, there's so much more to this. I'm just giving you the high level. But what I would like you to do, your homework after today, is draw this matrix model and actually write down, as a leader, this is where I might inadvertently be creating dependency. This is how dysfunction happens in our organization. If we can map that out, then we can flip it. Really good information to have. What do you think? So dysfunction is the exertion of power. I feel more powerful when I exert my power on you. Where does that happen? And what does that do to a culture? It decimates the culture. And you have a very hierarchical culture where nobody feels safe to lead, because leadership's dangerous. Think about the War of the Roses. The flag bearer was the leader. 100 yards in front of the army, holding the flag, no one nearby to protect them. What did the other army want to do first? Shoot the flag bearer. I get it. Leadership is dangerous. Putting your opinion forward can feel dangerous sometimes. But what if we created psychologically safe environments for people to test their thinking, to test their theory? It could be a very, very different landscape. Division. Now, division is really obvious. It's siloed. It's when I have something, but I'm not going to share it with you. Because again, thinking about that power piece, there's a power thread that runs through all of these. When I feel more powerful when I have knowledge that you do not have. So how, as a leader, do we create division? It's when we have favorites. You know, we treat everyone the same, do we? It's where our biases show up. You know, are we an inclusive culture? Are we leaders who create inclusivity? Or when we look around the table, we're just looking at everyone who looks like us, thinks like us, talks like us. Well, then maybe there's division in our inclusion strategy as much as how we bring others in. Really important. So again, how, as a leader, are you creating division in your organization? And I asked you directly, how as a leader are you doing that? Because you know what? We're human and we do all of this. You know, we do all of it because we're human. What we want to actually do is start to shift our focus so that we become a leader that creates leaders. And we flip that by being collaborative. We flip that by allowing people to be autonomous in our organizations. And we flip that by being adaptable, having adaptive leadership practices. What do you think? Andrew's saying it's not power that corrupts, rather than what corrupts is a lack of power to not use power. Interesting. Andrew, tell us more. I'm really keen to hear a little bit more about that. Rachel's saying it affects insecurity in the leader and the inability to trust others. Absolutely. What is trust? Doing what you say you are going to do. However, how do we actually enable and create trust in our organizations? It's a key cornerstone. And again, you've heard me speak before, you know that I love Brené Brown's breakdown of what trust is, her braving framework. So if you haven't seen her work on braving, it's do yourselves a huge favor and get on that. Any thoughts? Sean is saying you have to adapt your style to different personalities in your team. Absolutely. And Sean, it's not just about different personalities in your team, it's different skills and capability levels. Yeah, so you could have a highly motivated person who on a particular project or a piece of work doesn't have the same level of competency, technical knowledge or skill. So it's actually managing both. That's really important. Taking time to assess the team and the people that you're leading against motivation and capability and skill set, really good investment of your time. How are we going? Is everyone still awake? Just want to check. It's always good to know that, that you're still with me. So there are 3 key skills. Yep, all good with people. Yep, recognizing everyone. Yi Li is saying, recognizing that everyone has something valuable to contribute. Absolutely, you don't have to agree with their contribution, but you know what's really powerful is to acknowledge it. And there's a framework for that. It's clunky, but use a framework until it becomes smooth. What I really like about your idea is, and then and is how you add something to that. What I really like about your idea is, and also an acknowledgement goes deep to the heart. Acknowledge who the person is being while they're doing what they're doing. Very powerful. So 3 key skills. What are the 3 key skills that build a leadership culture? Who knows? Right, there's some people on the phone. So I'm leading the witness, Your Honours. I know there's some people here who absolutely know what they are. One is sponsorship. Sponsorship is a really key piece in how we create leadership in our organizations. Now, a sponsor is an advocate. You're almost like the person's corporate PR person. You shine the light on their key skills and capabilities. It's when you're in a meeting and someone says, we need someone to lead a project on, and you'll highlight that person's skills so they could step into the opportunity, but also there'll be a bit of a growth opportunity there for them. A sponsor will also allow shadowing opportunities. So if someone is a really great negotiator, they will allow the person they're sponsoring to come and sit in on some really complex key negotiations. So as a sponsor, you have an incredible privilege to play in the career of somebody else. One of my beautiful clients, Paula Benson, posted something on LinkedIn the other day saying that in these difficult times, she said, I'm here. You know, she's a really senior leader in her stage in her career, and she's willing to sponsor people to help them advance in their careers, particularly at this difficult time. There's some incredible people out there who have made such a difference to the lives of the people they lead and sponsor through sponsorship. The next one is mentorship. Mentoring is incredibly valuable. And the third one is coaching. With regard, mentoring coaching is very different. A mentor, and I know you know this, but I'm actually going to just go through it anyway. The difference between a mentor and a coach: a mentor has walked your path. A mentor has done what you're seeking to do. And a great mentor will mentor the person from a holistic stance. They won't just mentor on role and capability. They will also mentor on who the person is, what they want to achieve and what's important to them, combining that with role and capability. Coaching is a skill set that helps you help the person find their own answer. So a great coach asks fantastic questions, open questions. It's never a closed question. An open question will not end up with a yes or no answer. So for example, you'd be very careful about using why in coaching. Why did you do that? Has the person feel a little bit more defensive? What was important about this for you? That's an example of reframing to an open question. Open questioning, asking great questions, are what great leaders do when they are coaching their people and mentoring them, and actually filters through to sponsorship as well. We want to fix, solve, and save. Do you remember the dependency piece? Well, another way of creating dependency is solving problems. Jumping in, oh, I've got someone who's just joined as well. Hello, Miranda, welcome. Another way of that dependency piece is to fix, solve, and save. Now, here's the thing. Professional services, you're trained to fix and solve. That is what you do for a living, and you're really good at it. However, people are not things to be fixed, solved, and saved. So we have to sort of turn down the dial on that a little bit and connect with the person, ask them questions, give them space to solve their own challenges. That takes discipline. And a fantastic framework that you can use is WAIT. Why am I talking? That is an acronym just to have on a post-it note in every conversation that you ever have. Why am I talking? Sometimes we're talking to fill the space. Sometimes we're uncomfortable in silence. It would have been really easy in the case study I mentioned earlier on to break the silence and fill the gap. However, the accountability for the culture of the organization that I was describing earlier on sat with the 24 partners in the room. They were accountable for their culture, and only they could change it. So we had to wait, hold the space, give them time to reflect, and come up with their own solutions about whether or not they wanted to stay. Because if they didn't want to stay, keeping them there, locking the doors, would be really unhelpful. So start to think about, when do you create noise when actually silence is a better option? Leadership is a complex issue, and I want you to think about, and this again, please could you pop some words in the chat box, so just get ready to start typing. I want you to think about what words come to mind when you think about leadership. What are the words that come to mind when you think about leadership? And I'm just going to look down at the chat box. No, can I see anything in there? What words come to mind? Support, Leonie, thank you. What else? Compassion, courage, vision, inspiration, generosity, serving others. Yep. Integrity. I asked some emerging leaders in a leadership program what their views of leadership were, and this is what they said. Problem, growing, balance, positive effort, empathetic, hierarchy, team player, communication, build trust, reluctant, challenged, mentally draining, enriching, anger, helpful, humble, visionary, mentor, motivating, ego, fear. Now there are so many feelings, words, expectations that come with leadership. Understanding your views on leadership and matching them to how others in your organization and team seeing leadership, this is something that would just provide so much insight and value to you if you have time, and I say make the time to do it. Ask your people about their views on leadership and mind map what they say. After you do that, then ask the next question. What words come to mind when you think of your expectations of leadership? So here's what they said. Pressure, frustration, sounding board, need space, angry, connected, good listener, admirable person, evolving, supportive, dress well, lead by example, someone you can believe in. Disciplinarian was an interesting one. To be liked by everybody, interesting as well. So really incredibly interesting to think about how we see leadership and what our expectations of leadership are, and how aligned or how connected or disconnected is this. Important. Alex is saying, the people I've learned the most from in my career seem to like that they weren't even trying, they were being their authentic selves and modeling behavior. And I absorbed almost subconsciously. Alex, absolutely. And I think when it comes to leadership frameworks, it's really important to put yourself in that. And I'll be talking about that a little bit later on. So I want to provide you with some tools and some resources that you can actually use to help continue to drive a culture where leaders create leaders. There's the human being on the bottom. That's you. In an organization, what happens a lot is we go to the issue first. Yeah, we go problem solve, let's fix the issue. But you know what? People aren't issues. We spoke about that earlier on. What we need to do is we need to connect with the human being who has an issue or who we have an issue with. Because when we go straight to the issue, we treat people like objects. And when we treat people like objects in its extreme, that's when wars happen. That's when we can hit a button in one country and blow up somebody in another country, because we dehumanize. We need to connect with the human being first so we can bring authentic, compassionate, caring into our leadership. Because when we don't, we derail the system, we derail people, and we hurt people. And I don't think anyone here wants to do that. So connect with the person first, separate the person from the issue, and be curious, listen, ask open questions, and wait. Take a photograph of that slide and just start using it straight away. It's an absolute keeper. How do you have conversations? Most leaders I talk to say, look, I get all this. I understand that we want to create a culture where leaders create leaders, but I find some of the more difficult conversations really hard to have. There's a framework. Everything is a framework. I love a good template. This one is from Kerry Patterson and a bunch of other authors who wrote a book called Courageous Confrontations. I think I mentioned this in the last episode as well. C stands for CPR. Yeah, we all know about CPR. It's an easy one to remember. C stands for content. What is the content that I want to talk about? One line definitive statement. Make sure it's clear. JFK said, we are going to the moon. Everybody knew what he was talking about. What is the pattern? What is the pattern I'm observing? Speak to the pattern. How does it impact relationships? And how does it impact results? I've added an extra R on their model because we need to look at both relationships and results when we're thinking about how we lead others. Leadership frameworks. Go and learn and invest in developing leadership frameworks. Situational leadership is a great framework. Adaptive leadership is a fantastic framework. There are many. And Alex, as you mentioned, when you see framework people who are demonstrating constructive leadership, they have a framework, but you don't have to emulate and copy everyone's frameworks. Be inspired by great leaders, but take some time to map out your own leadership strategy so that it's authentically you and you bring yourself to that process. Another great investment of your time is to think about your role balance. I've done a lot of work with incredible people in professional services, and taking time to actually find out how much time you spend day to day in 3 key areas has been very helpful. One is strategic thinking. How much, as a percentage, how much time do you spend in strategy and strategic thinking? Just pop some numbers in there. Let me have a look. How much time do you spend focusing on the client experience? What's the percentage there? Sean is saying not enough. And thank you, Thomas, saying good insights and needs to jump off the call. See you later, Thomas. How much time do you spend developing your people and your culture? If you could start to map out, and then where are you spending more time in other areas, and start to assess, is this the best energy, time, and investment that you can be spending? What are you avoiding? And sometimes we do avoid. Now, I know that everybody on this call wants the best for people. I also know that those 24 partners that I worked with actually wanted the best for people. They had got stuck in a pattern of showing up, behaving, and in behaviors that were actually normalized, so they didn't realize how destructive the behaviors were. The courageous bit came when they actually did realize, and they had to keep showing up to change them. So nobody wakes up in the morning except for Dr. Evil to wreak havoc in the world. People don't do that, and yet sometimes inadvertently we engage in destructive behaviors, and that really impacts the health and well-being of others. Think about understanding how this happens, but also understanding what motivates your people and creates future leaders. Do you know what motivates the people you lead? Taking time to have clarity on your people's strengths, development means, and what they want is a foundation to helping them grow. Do you have this clarity? Creating a regular cadence of connecting and having conversations with your people demonstrates that you genuinely care in action. Respect was a key value for the organization that I was supporting with the 24 partners I worked with. And what a privilege to do that work and to see the turnaround. However, they were not respectful in their behaviors to each other and ultimately to themselves. So when was the last time you had a conversation with the people that you lead to understand their needs? I've provided a framework for you to do that, and I'll send this out to you as a resource. But essentially take some time to map it out. Name the people that you work with, the current leadership style you employ to motivate, support them, and then also which one is best to the task and their motivation. And then of course the action that you're going to take, otherwise it's just a daydream. How are we going? Okay, 5 questions great leaders ask themselves repeatedly. One of them is, what will I do this month to be a leader of choice? Now, what type of leader would you want? Be that leader. What extra knowledge could I share with my team to improve their performance? Not my numbers, to provide for their performance. That's a great focus on other. What is the next thing I could successfully delegate? Because when we create dependency, the person that loses the most is the people that you're leading for lost opportunity, but you lose so much yourself because the lost opportunity of what you can move on to. The sign of an incredible leader who creates a leadership culture is essentially, in a lot of the roles and the functions that you perform day to day, you become redundant in that. Awesome. That allows you to move on and do something else. What is the next thing I could successfully delegate is a great question to ask yourself. And what else will I do to increase connection with my team? What can you do today to increase connection with your team? And you know what? Why would you do that? Why bother? What's in it for them? What's in it for you? And what's in it for your organization? I know there's been a lot of content here today. We will share the information to you. And I just want to say again, thank you so much. The final question was, do I hold realistic expectations of my people? And I'd also like you to flick that around and ask yourself, do I hold realistic expectations of myself? Because that's a foundational key core question. Thank you. I absolutely love running these webinars. I love spending time with you. Really appreciate everybody attending and being here today. Please let me know what you got from this session, but I actually really want to know, what are you going to do with this information? Now, I'm not sure if everyone's across the 70-20-10, but 70-20-10 is how we learn as adults. I don't know what that buzzing is going on in the background of my computer, but I'm so sorry. But we'll just leave it in there. So 70-20-10, this is how we learn, and it's really important information that you can use as you create a culture of leadership in your organization. Think about when you learnt to drive. Mr. John Pappas, yours is the face I can see on the screen. So I want you to tell everybody, just pop yourself off mute. When did you learn to drive?
I'm trying to pop. Can you hear me now?
I can.
Yeah.
I can. I started to learn to drive when I was 16.
16. Fantastic. Awesome. Andrew Aston, when did you learn to drive? You're on mute, my love. Just unmute yourself.
About the same time, I think, from memory, 16, 17.
16.
Sitting on my father's lap behind the wheel, against the law these days.
Okay.
Remember that, John?
Fantastic.
That was when I was younger.
So a lot of people will tell me when I ask this question that they learned to drive when they got their license. And so you two are outliers, and I love the creative thinking and the honesty. So you learned to drive before you got your license. But for most people, they often will say, I learned to drive when I got my license. Just put yourselves back on mute, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you. However, you didn't learn to drive when you got your license. You learned to drive after you had your license. And this is the context of the 70-20-10. The 10% is your learner's permit. Yeah, that's when you did the test and did the theory and you got your learners. The 20% was any brave soul or fool who got in a car with you while you were learning to drive. Mentoring, coaching, sponsorship. Yeah, that's the three categories. You learned to drive when you got your license. That's the 70%, when you actually were on the road driving. What does this tell you about how you lead your people? Yeah. First of all, you give some training. You do something like this, 10%. 10%. That's not enough of a return on investment. Companies that incorporate sponsorship, mentoring, and coaching get an 80% increase on their training initiatives. An 80% increase. That's worth thinking about. The 20%, the 70% is how you go off and drive. So I want to know, what are you going to do with this information today in the 20% and the 70%? Please don't say nothing. I'll be so sad.
Practice. I'm going to practice, Pollyanna.
Thank you, Shauna.
Yes. Yeah, because, you know, when we learn to drive, we have to do a lot of practice. So I'm sure we all need to look at every day a little bit more carefully and spend the time, don't we? Invest the time in ourselves and our teams.
I think so. I think so. Well, I know we're probably heading up to time, and I wanted to say thank you so much for being here today, and thank you, Shauna, again, and Consulting for sponsoring this event and making it possible for us to support our clients and network and people we care about.
Thank you, Pollyanna. It's been absolutely a pleasure, and I've learned a lot through this series, and I will continue to learn from you. But you've been fantastic, and I think everyone who's joined has taken away lots of really interesting pieces, and it's been a great time to do it, hasn't it? Giving back to people while they're at home, and being able to spend a little bit of time on themselves. So and I think
so. Yeah, I think so. And maybe if everyone's happy to, why don't you if you're happy to put your cameras on, we can get a nice picture of everyone together on the call. It's always
that would be great.
I figured out that my beeping is every time someone puts something in the chat box, but that's new. That's a new thing. So I'll work out the tech on that. How beautiful to see everyone's faces.
Isn't it?
Is everyone happy? Oh, Tayab, I didn't know you were on today. Hello, nice to see you. Kathy, nice to see you as well.
Okay.
Who's still in their pajamas?
Who's in their pajamas?
Okay, so is everyone happy for me to take a photo, and I'll have to move the screens around? Put your best smile. It's always good to do. I have to take a couple actually, because there's a lot of people on the call. So there you go. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Fabulous.
Any questions?
Any questions, anybody? No, not really, not at the moment. Pollyanna, I think we've all got a lot to go away and think about. Thank you very much. That's fantastic. And have a lovely weekend, everybody. And Pollyanna, especially you too.
Thank you so much. And thank you again. It's been an absolute pleasure to spend time with you. Thank you.